change my mind about Cassava over the weekend? What? You know what? You're right. The drug works. I did do some really interesting chemistry thinking, which I'll put in my report. There's an interesting thing about chemistry, and I wonder if there's any chemist here. But let me show you some chemistry. So it's not clear that it crosses the blood-brain barrier. That is definitely true. But let's do maybe ball and stick. There we go. A little bit better here. Space filling is also nice. Okay, so there's actually a lot of conformers, but let's see. Okay, this is good. So it's very hard for a molecule like this to do anything on a PPI basis. So filament is not an enzyme, right? It's also not a receptor. Okay. So as this turns around, I want you to think about this. So this is all lipophilic right here, this 6-membered ring. And the only thing that this 6-membered ring can do is create a lipophilic interaction with another lipophilic pocket. So it can space fill. It can do that fairly decently. Like this would be a fine drug for the right enzyme, right? It fills a pocket. Okay, so now we have an oxygen over here. Here's the maybe a better representation as well in 2D. Then we have another methyl group here that'll space fill. And depending on the 3D orientation, like you can see that the conformer here is fairly three-dimensional. It's not what it looks like on paper. Fine. But you have to look at filament next and see, where does this thing fit in filament? This is the kind of small molecule that would fit really well in a binding pocket of an enzyme. It still is a little light on energetics, like there's not really many hydrogen bonds that it can make, right? So you can get pi stacking with the benzene, but it's very hard to get much more than that. So with this oxygen, you can also sort of hydrogen bond accept. But there's very little going on here in terms of like molecular energetics. So hydrogen bond acceptors 3, hydrogen bond donors 1. Now you don't want that many hydrogen bond donors, and you don't want too many hydrogen bond acceptors. But if you have 0, right? You can agree with me that just a fat molecule is not going to do anything, right? So you got very little going on here. And again, these small molecules work really well for molecules that have a docking like pocket they have to bind into. Right? You want to fill a pocket to stop an enzyme from working. All right, now let's look at filament. And hopefully we can actually find a crystal structure. Here's a crystal structure, but it's only some domains of filament. So it's not the full filament protein. This is just like a very small part of it. I wonder if we can find a bigger one or make one with AlphaFold maybe. I wonder if there's like the most complete filament we can find here. Maybe we can sort by more to less residues. No, you cannot block. I need filament in the title, otherwise this is a disaster. Does this even have anything in the title? Okay. It's a little painful to use. Give me a minute. Oh my god. Okay. Yeah, I don't think too many people would attempt the entire crystal structure of every domain of filament. It's kind of a beast protein. I don't think you could even do it, to be honest. It's too big. Boom. But where there's a will, there's a way, and I can probably pull these into some chemistry software. Should we try AlphaFold? I've never even tried it. So this is where Filament does its action, the so-called actin binding domain. This is mostly where Filament works. This is 270 amino acids, which is like 1/10 of Filament, but this is 1/10 of Filament. So little Simufilam has to find a way in here to do something. Now the problem is Simufilam's too small. Look at this sulfate ion. It's barely bigger than this. This is just normal ions and solutes. So where do you make the hydrogen bond? Could be anywhere, right? But how many hydrogen bonds can you make? And you were trying to stop the interaction of two proteins. Very hard to do. You generally need a really big molecule for that, like 2,000 molecular weight. So 10 times bigger than Simufilam. Because you kind of have to wrap it around the protein-protein binding interface. Let me see if I can make this more clear. Like here you see a benzene coming out of a histamine. Right? Here's another one from phenylalanine. So like, could you pi stack on here? Yes. We have one benzene here, and theoretically we can make like a pi bonding interaction there. Like say right here. But how will this stop nicotinic receptor alpha 7, which is also was pretty much useless, doesn't do anything in Alzheimer's. How would that stop that protein from binding to this massive protein? So you're looking at a 2,000 amino acid residue protein and a 200 Dalton molecular weight small molecule stopping the binding between these two. It's really like thinking about, I don't know, like a huge magnet picking up an automobile, maybe in a junkyard, right? Here's an automobile. And then having like a stick of gum here and saying that stick of gum is going to stop these two from working. It's going to stop the interaction. You really have to wrap around the entire binding site. And a small molecule really can't do that in general. That's why we have antibodies. But antibodies don't get into cells. So this is kind of a ridiculous premise to begin with, but I spent a lot of time on this premise just because when you look at medicines, it really makes sense to like actually give credit to the other side. Now remember, this is 1/20th of what filament actually looks like. It's really big protein. So I'm going to stop this really big protein from binding to this other really big protein, okay? Here's this gigantic protein and nicotinic ion channel receptor. Ion channel 476 pentameric transmembrane protein. Somehow filament is binding to this, which by the way, I don't believe, but assume it is. And little Simufilam is going to stop the binding of this guy and this guy. These aren't always easy to work with. So somewhere there's a binding interaction. And again, this really, really small molecule, which I can add to the PDB file, this is the guy that's going to end it all. Seems unlikely. And it's unlikely because it's as unlikely as you can imagine, because why would it be likely? Most large molecules, so where 4090 would help, right? Most large molecules most protein-protein interactions, when you try to design a PPI inhibitor, you are not, you're going to do it with a larger molecule. This molecule is way too small. Pretty pictures, but not too useful for our benefit. So not PPI proton pump, but protein-protein interaction. Different PPI. This is medicinal chemistry. So again, I would challenge Cassava to say, where are we stopping this interaction? And they didn't do the science for that. And how do we know that? Well, let's look at their patent. Yeah, proton pump inhibitor, great for a little bit of GERD or heartburn. Let me see if I can find their patent here. There's literally, this is about Cassava, the plant. That is not what we're looking for. Okay. Remy got a patent. That's kind of funny. As a CEO, you don't really want to be in the patent business. Let your scientists do that, you know? Just kind of cringe. Oh, was this guy scamming as early as 2012? Oh, he had this. Okay, hold on. I'm just trying to look at the date of this application. Okay, this was filed 2020, so that. These patents kind of represent probably the most critical data. Fake Western blots. What is this supposed to be? Percent stimulation, calcium influx of the ion channel. Okay. These all look the same. These like all could be done. There's no causality between A beta 42 and alpha 7. They're really like just not related. and that's been proven over and over again. Okay, so what's this supposed to be? 14B. There's a label for this somewhere, but so ICV is intracerebral ventricular, A beta 42 versus with drug. There's sham and sham. This kind of data looks interesting, assuming it's not fake. This looks like measurement error. I mean, inhibition of what? I'm going to have to go through these patents really carefully. This is basically where all the science exists, because the publications don't do anything. Patents, you have to be a little bit more explicit. Well, the problem is if you, and I'm going to write about this, when you're trying to develop an assay, like, typically, none of this stuff really makes a difference. Okay, here we're starting to get a little, this is kind of what I was going to talk about. You need stuff like this. So, I'm not sure what this is AB42 binding to what exactly, but in general, what you're trying to prove is that in the presence of your drug, you're like shifting the binding characteristics of some canonical ligand. And you could do that here. But I'm not sure that they ever tried. I wish there was somebody who understood the Cassava science that could actually walk us through some of this. I mean, I understand it, but the bears are going to say, oh, well, Shkreli, you're just coloring it negatively. But here's the peptide that they say it binds to. So this is valine. Yeah, let's just pull this up. I think I can create this in some chemistry software. AB42 is amyloid beta, 42 peptides, yeah, or 42 amino acids. So here's like GenScript has a little online tool. So let's do vagcl vag L. So it's valine, alanine, alanine, glycine, leucine. I don't think, yeah, this is like too sophisticated for kind of what I'm looking for. Here's maybe a different one. And we can actually look at the, this isn't hard to actually look at the binding. Okay, here's one from Tulane called Pep Draw. Okay, so here's Vagil. I can get some like chemist buddies here to talk about this, but okay, here they say that Vagil and Simufilam have this exquisitely good binding. Okay, so here's Simufilam. I copy this. Okay, so you tell me. You tell me where this happens. So if I take this guy, and let me see if I can rotate it. Yeah. It's a little tricky, but maybe you can get some energetics here. Okay, and then maybe here. So this is a bond. But the problem with this bond is we know the strength of hydrogen bonds, right? We actually know the strength of these hydrogen bonds. Do you guys know what they are? Kilocals, right? They're measured in kilocals. So yeah, I don't see how you could really get a serious binder here. Maybe here. Yeah, I'm writing it solo. You have to add up, yeah, so Vagil is the binding site, theoretically, of filament A. And we can actually do the ligand docking online. There's this thing, there's a couple of these things. So there's SwissDoc, and we could do SMILES here, and then we could do PDB, or we could prepare our own PDB. And after we start docking, we can get the docking experiment. I actually had a thing called drug-like, which I could also use. Yeah, so I can roughly calculate the binding affinity, but it's going to be fairly low. I mean, it's kilocal per mole, right? We don't have commodity prices yet now. All right, so we'll do some medicinal chemistry later, but I don't see how you could get to a level that would be reasonable. Or specific, like this would bind any peptide with low affinity.